At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Thank you so much for being here. So today we're going to talk about effective trade promotion strategies and how that begins with a solid business plan. And so Michael, the nice guy on the screen that you see, he's an expert in putting together business plans for brands and helping brands get from point A to point B. In other words, scale and grow and all the things you need to do. So he is the de facto expert in this. But first, I want to thank all the people, all the companies that are helping with this. ECRM, Range Me, Whole Foods Magazine, Social Nature, C-Suite Network, C-Suite Radio, Bricktown Group, Promo Mash, Supermarket Guru, Big Orange Productions, Summit Sales Success, Food Business Success, Base Camp, Produce Moms, Plant-Based Solutions, 4 Points, Green Circle Capitals, and Forest Brands. So do me a favor and support them and thank them for being a part of this. So the reason we're here today is when Expo was canceled, I decided to lean in and start putting out content to help address your specific questions. So the questions that you're seeing in this webinar series are the questions that people send me that I'm trying to address on your behalf. So do me a favor, and if you've got some additional questions, let me know. Let me know what keeps you up at night. And then also please share these resources, these valuable resources with your community. And so next week, we're going to talk about the 4 points of building and scaling a brand in the era of COVID, which of course is very relevant. What's cool about this particular webinar is that 4 Points has their own co-packing facility. So they can talk about everything soup to nuts, beginning all the way through the process of coming up with a brand, an idea, and then delivering it to retail. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about how to protect your cash flow from frivolous deductions, which is a huge topic, you know, whether you call them deductions, chargebacks, go backs, whatever. This is the single biggest pain point that every brand has. And on that note, when we talk about sales success begins with a solid business plan, this is a course that Michael and I did together. It's on my school. You can get there by going to the school. Check it out. It's a free course. And the reason this matters is that your business plan needs to be very solid. It needs to be well put together. My point is that your business plan should be so complete that anyone could come in and run your brand on your behalf in your absence, and it would include everything they need to do in terms of the execution, what stores, how to promote everything. Today's presentation, we're going to take it to the next level and focus more on promotions than our just generic business plan. And then on that note, because I'm trying to help brands scale during this time, I've made the proven strategies to trade marketing, to maximize trade marketing ROI free if you use the code Trade Essentials. So you can go to my website and you can find it there. And then Michael, I've got that other video queued up so we can get to that in a bit, but I'm going to stop sharing for now. So Michael, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you help brands?
Well, first off, thank you, Dan, for inviting me. And second of all, what we're seeing today is that for myself, I started with Anheuser-Busch many years ago and worked my way up in DSD, both on the pedal. You loaded your truck, you pedaled to get everything off of it, and you strategically thought of exactly who you were going to sell to, which packages, what type of displays, shelf sets, and all that. Then I moved into what they call pre-sell. And in pre-sell, what I did there was pretty interesting. I was the first one, and I became the national trainer of how you set your day up for sales, going into both supermarkets, convenience stores, and of course the open market, your corner delis and all that. Then I moved on to Nestle's Waters, where I built both the retail side and the home and office side simultaneously, because we wanted to keep the price value equation pretty much together. Okay. Then after that, I went to work for Bain Capital, where I began really my journey here with Belmont Food. I'm sorry, Belmont, Belmont, Belmullet Food and Beverage. It's been a long morning already. And in that, we were able to really I to really understand the financial sides, which Bain Capital, I was very fortunate along with Aries to learn. And then after that, we took some brands literally from a startup and we got them up to $10 million. I was also part of, as our dear friend Eric Skay, helping out with Rayos, and Eric led that charge to sell that company for $412 million. And then after that, I went on to work with other brands now that are getting either staged for sale or they're working toward their goal of keeping the brand. So here at the Balmoral Food and Beverage Group, what we try to do is first, let's find out who you are, what you want to do, and do you have an exit strategy or do you want to keep the company? Those are probably about the two simplest ways. And there's other ways of doing that, as you know, how the business expands and how it may grow, either quickly or steadily. It depends. Again, and that comes back to your business plan.
Thank you for sharing that. In fact, on that note, one of the things that I was overlooking in my background, but Brad Barnhart made a point of saying, hey, you need to focus on that more, I should focus on that more, is DSD. The basics of selling are so critically important to the success of every brand. And if you can do this and do this right, then that's going to help you grow and scale. And so the point being is, like Michael, understanding the relationship between the brand, the retailer, the consumer is where the conversation needs to start. And so again, Michael is the expert in understanding how to leverage that with brands and help support them and help them drive sales. And that all begins with a solid business plan. So Michael, would you like to start out with your first point, which is strategy?
Yes. First off, let's talk about strategy in general. You have to have like the essential elements of a business plan. So first thing I always tell people is, okay, what is your product? We don't have a brand yet because you have to develop that within your business plan and marketing plan, tied together. So what is your product? And then after, when I talk to a entrepreneur, a founder or whatever, the first thing I ask is, what have you done on the side of competitive analysis? Do you understand the category? And maybe you might be in a subcategory that you would own. And Dan and myself worked on a certain project for a company. They were number one in the subcategory, but they were in a massive category until Dan broke it out and showed, the numbers correctly. It showed that particular owner owned the subcategory they didn't even know about. Right? So when you get your business plan, the first thing I always tell people is the executive summary. Keep it to one page. Don't go more than a page. It really has to be precise of what you're trying to do, what you're being involved with, which markets you're trying to sell to. That's it. I've seen too many executive summaries, 2, 3, 4 pages, and there's nothing concise and really designated to what you're trying to do with this product that you're developing to a brand, right? And the second, let's go to the marketplace and competitive analysis. One of the books I strongly recommend to the group here, it's called The Modern Competitive Analysis by Sharon Osler. This book is very good. I really believe in the book. I've had it for years. And there have been some updates with it. And Michael Porter has also his book. But this one I like because it really dives deep into what you're supposed to be on the competitive set. And are you in a category that you're not going to be a disruptor? There's nothing unique. There's nothing different. That's when you have to say to yourself, do I really have the wherewithal mentally to do this, to get into that side of your business? So you have to be very careful. I think most of the times people run into a category and they say, well, it's 23 billion. Well, there's about 6 or 7 characters that have been there for 10 plus years. And we both know, as you like to say, Dan, you're going to be an endless ATM machine asking for more money, more money. And really, in this day and age, a lot of investors, and I had a great conversation with one of them today with a brand. He said, Mike, our timelines have really shrank. It's about 36 to 40 months. We have to see a break even, and whatever that break even is. And that also has to be in your business plan. And he also said to me, which was interesting, he goes, Mike, I saw what you wrote here about the competitive strategies and what some of them are doing to, quote, get bad volume. And that's something that I never heard before. And we talked about that at length. Okay. So your next one is really your sales and marketing objectives. What are you trying to do selling this product and marketing it? Again, this part here, part 3, should be no more than 2 pages. Sales and then the marketing. And really have it nice and detailed of exactly what you're trying to do in your sales and your marketing side of that. The next thing is your sales and marketing plan itself. Who is your target consumer? And I like what Dan always said. If you don't know who your consumer is, then you don't know who's going to buy it. And the other thing that Dan probably hears a lot that I hear is everybody's my consumer. Well, that's like saying you're selling and everybody's your customer. No. That's where, again, you have to know your target customer. You can do it by a consumer journey tree. You can do it by a consumer, what I call branch tree of what they are, who they are, and why they may come to your product and why they should buy it, right? So those things, as a consumer journey map, I like to call it, should be in there. So you're trying to explain to an investor or to your employees that you're hiring exactly what you're trying to do, right? And we see a lot of confusion with that because it starts at the top. And one of the things that I always tell people is if you have a consistent message and you have a consistent process, you should have consistent execution points for what I call, consistent sales. That's one of the things I'm seeing in a lot of the business plans that's not being done is that the owner, founder says one thing, but they're not following what they wrote in the business plan. And it's like you're sort of off the reservation, as I like to call it. Let's get you back on it to say, why did you change this? And if you did the employees bring that in? Make the adjustment in the business plan so we all stay consistent with it. And that's another thing I say. The next one, and this is where the marketing and sales strategy really comes, I think, full fold. I call it the four-legged stool. Your e-commerce site. What are you trying to do to get the consumer to look at your brand? You've got about 10.4 seconds from what I've been reading, which I do agree with, to tell them why you should buy our brand. And in that e-commerce, you have to really explain quickly what's so great about the brand and not to have a total writing of everything, ingredients and all, because the consumer can do that if they like it to page 2. And I can say this now, one of the statistics I saw at IRI is that 64% of the people will leave that page after 15 seconds because of too much information. They don't know what the brand or product really means to them, and they won't even get to the second page. So that's where you have to really build your e-commerce platform extremely succinct and to the point. Next on the e-commerce, I call it, as it goes across the chair, is the e-commerce with your retail, right, partners, a Kroger, a Safeway, Albertsons, so on and so forth, that you're working with them, that you can tell them why your brand fits there. You're a destination brand. No one else has this type of brand. And you could help them bring in their new consumer and increase their basket sales to their existing customers as well, right? Then the next one, you have to have your brick and mortar. And that's where some of the things that I come into is, okay, which supermarket chain should we be in? Well, if you're produced in New York, I would suggest that you go to a ShopRite, Wakefern. Get to them, Ahold, okay, and you're staying on what I call the 95 corridor. And then up, you can go to maybe a Market Basket, New England. So now you're pretty much within 4 hours, like as Eric Skay likes to say, of distance to go see the stores, to check out what's being done, to make sure the pricing's correct, to make sure the shelf positioning that you discussed with the buyer has been done, and your broker is executing that, which we'll talk about a little bit in the next. And the last thing is to talk about the brand itself. In that, your brand is here, It's working with your brick and mortar there. It's working with your e-commerce here and your e-commerce over here with the retail. Now, the other thing, the e-commerce, I want people to understand is you've got to have that just for Amazon itself. Amazon has two levels. They have one, which is Seller Central, and the other one is Vendor Central. I think you should be on both platforms. You do blend a little bit of the margin down, but it does give you better exposure to be there and to be able to sell to that consumer as well. And one of the things that we have seen in retail just recently is part of that people are now using Amazon more as a search for food and beverage companies and products in general. Okay? And then the last thing is your marketing and sales budget overview. And that's really where the meat and potatoes start. And one of the things that Dan has built, and I'm a big proponent and fan of it, is his trade marketing courses that I think everyone should really pay for. It's going to, I use the old thing with Fram. You can pay me now or pay me later. Well, if you pay for Dan now, you won't be paying for the heavy expenses later. And Dan is correct. Between 70 to 75% of the trade spend dollars are wasted because you're not reviewing what you spent. You're not understanding what you spent. And the third biggest problem is you've already spent it and it's an ill spend. So to stop all those three at once, one of the things that Dan has is this wonderful tool that you could look at a promotion and find out exactly what's being spent.
Thanks for saying that. Okay, checks in the mail. No, I appreciate that. And that is so important. So, and we'll get back to that in a minute, but let's back up a little bit. A lot of great information. Yep. Thank you for sharing all those insights. So let's boil this down to the fact that your business plan is your roadmap. It's your blueprint, whatever you want to call it. Your business plan is what keeps you focused and on the guardrails. Too many brands, as Michael was talking about, are so busy looking at the next shiny object, you know, where, like a squirrel, where's the nut, or where's the joke where, you know, the dog's always like, there's a squirrel, oh, there's a squirrel, and always being thrown off course. And the point is that you need something to keep you on course. And if you can do that and build that into your business plan, you're going to be so much more effective than other brands. The other thing Michael talked about, which thank you again, this is exactly why I built my free turnkey sales story strategies course. If I tell you a story and you tell someone else and they tell someone else and so on, by the time the story comes back around to me, it's unrecognizable. Like Michael said, if your message, if your strategy, if everything that you're doing in your brand is not communicated effectively with the same passion and as enthusiasm across your entire sales funnel, you will fail. This is the biggest Achilles heel for every brand. And so as you're just talking about a minute ago, if my strategy is to grow 5% or 10% or something like that every year, and I'm in New York, and all of a sudden someone in California says, I want your product on my shelf, how are you going to support that? Is that within your business plan? That, in my opinion, I think Michael would agree with me, is something you think about down the road. And so critically important that you've got all that set up within your business plan so that you can just focus on, like Michael said again, execution. This is why this matters. Most brands don't execute well. Most brands don't do a good job or effective job of holding their broker partners accountable to the execution. Most brands don't execute well when they get their product on shelf. Think about it this way. Your brand has your name on it. And if there's an out of stock, or if your product's damaged or something like that, if they can't find it, if it's mismerchandised, it's in a bad place in the store, that's not the retailer's fault. That's your fault from the consumer's perspective. So how do you fix that? How do you communicate to the retailer that you've made a commitment to address that, to stay on top of that, et cetera? And then, of course, as you're doing this, when you're talking about potential investors, the value of your company, as Michael keeps alluding to, that's where this comes into play, because investors want to know that they can get a return on their investment. They want to be able to trust that you're going to manage their money effectively. And so if you've got a solid business plan and you put all that into it, that's going to help them feel more comfortable. And that's going to put you in a position if you do it right, where you can negotiate better terms. I know I've thrown a lot at you, Michael. What else do you want to add around that, or what things have I not talked about or are included in that?
No, you brought up a good thing with the brokers. One of the things that I use, and Dan, you've heard me say this numerous times, is that I use the analogy is it's like an infant. Well, you don't go to somebody's door, knock on the door and say, look, I'll be back in 18 years, make sure it grows up right, and I'll come back to get it for college or him for college. You've got to stay on top of that broker, working with them. And by the way, have a script of exactly talking to the broker, what your points are about your brand. Keep them focused like you're focused. So you know what? To your point, Dan, that story stays consistent here to consistent there. The problem is people don't go in working with their brokers. They hand stuff over. Well, my broker isn't doing well. I hate to say this, that's your fault because you're the head coach. And I always say you can't yell at the player unless you taught him. Right? So you have to teach that broker, this is what my brand is. This is the category we're in or the subcategory. This is the competitive set. This is where we need to be, right? And then taking your sales deck that you build for them. Do not have the broker build it. Let you build it because that message stays consistent. So when you give it to them, it's rolling off your tongue. Your passion is right behind it, right? And you're also working with that broker that they totally understand you. And the other thing too is don't be afraid not to ask to go on the sales calls. Historically, what I've seen from major retailers is when they hear the founder and they hear the story of how the brand was developed and why did you develop it, and that passion comes across, that really helps out during that initial sales call, okay? And that's one of the other things too, when we talk about the trade spend, you and I talked about it, we're seeing a lot of changing parts, folks, happening as we speak. And this is why this tool and some of the things that Dan teaches is going to be more relevant now than ever before, because this virus has changed the way retailers are going to look at sales, promotions, and execution. I will not tell you the retailers said this to me by name, but they said, Mike, we kept a little scorecard. And there's some brands that will not come back on our shelf because they didn't identify why we were out of stock, but our competition got their product. We don't understand why we weren't notified that they were going to be out of stock, and they just kept saying it was just about the virus. So those are the other things, too, that retailers are doing. Yes, they do have a little scorecard, and yes, they're looking at who worked with them and who didn't.
So critically important. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, it reminds me. Well, first of all, first thing you said, I just published podcast episode 205 with Charles Organic, and Maddie was talking about how he goes out and makes a point of working with a retailer. They've got a short video, actually it's about 29 minutes, but it talks about the brand and it gives a really good flavor for the brand and an understanding of the brand. To your point, you've got to make sure your broker is talking about your brand in with the same passion. And if you think about a broker, there's some good, there's some good mechanics, bad mechanics, all that other stuff.
Right.
You know, you've got to get them on board, and their success is your success and vice versa. And so if you can help them understand what's unique about your consumer. So in this example, they're talking about regenerative organic and why that matters and why that's so critically important and how they're helping out the farmers. And it's a great episode. So check it out. But the point is, if you can leverage that within your broker and develop that relationship and have that ongoing working relationship with them, challenging them to actually use your product. What a concept, right? So that's going to help out a lot. But then in terms of what Michael said, as far as the execution piece, cannot overstate this. This is the Achilles heel of every brand. Big brands have a lot of trouble with this as well. And there's a lot more to just having enough product on the shelf. You got to have the right placement. You got to know how many people buy it. That we'll talk about that later. But as Michael said, retailers want to feel special. And if you are in a retail store, think of it as a gift. And if you're doing something different in their competition and they find out about it, they're going to say, hey, where's the love? Why aren't you doing this for me? Or how come I'm not getting what I need? Or why are you promoting deeper down the street at a deeper discount down the street? All of these things impact your ability to grow and scale. Remember, this relationship is about trust. This industry is about trust. It's not only the consumer that needs to trust your products, it's the retailer that they want to be able to trust that you're going to help support them. Remember, keep talking about this. The three things retailers want: reasonable profit in the category, they want a competitive advantage in their market, and they want more foot traffic in their store. And if you can support them and help them meet their needs, a savvy retailer will bend over backwards to help you. So as Michael talked about the trade marketing, actually, let's talk about, before you do that, let's talk about, Michael said, the Amazon strategy. I believe also you should consider Shopify. Also have a way to sell your products online within your site. I've got some creative strategies that we've talked about, other podcast episodes, etc., where you can leverage that, as Michael said, to drive sales in traditional retail. So I just wanted to make that point. Your online presence is critically important, because if all the retailers disappeared tomorrow, who would buy your products? Now, I've been saying that for years, not knowing that we'd have a pandemic. But the point is, as Michael was alluding to, now small brands are getting squeezed out. And they're getting squeezed out because retailers are looking toward that drug that they call trade marketing. They're looking for the big brands that can pay the slotting and all the big fees they charge. And they're looking at velocity as being a metric that's more important today than it was before. We've had a lot of discussions about this on the podcast, the webinars, etc. Small brands cannot compete on velocity, total movement. Small brands instead should compete on contribution. And more importantly, what does your product drive into the store in terms of market basket growth and profit and stuff like that? That's where you need to be. That's where the trade marketing piece comes into play, and that's where all these other strategies we're talking about. So, Michael, before we get into the trade marketing piece, any thoughts?
Mhm. Well, one thing is, and I wanted to put this book up, it's the strategy of tactics of pricing. It's by Thomas Nagel. And this is another, I like to call, and as you look behind me, I have 4 bookcases for business. And over the years, I have my own personal library, and I try to update it once a year, give away the older editions, get new editions, whatever it may be, because this is the changing that you and I talk about. And I'm glad you brought up Spotify. I didn't want to bring that up. That's how we have to get our clients, not just with Amazon, of course, right? But that's really, you're correct. And one of the things I will tell somebody, and this stat just came out, I got it right here. The 60 plus group, 47% are going to continue to stay online. And some of the reasons were still not sure about going to a store, ease of store and all that. And here's another thing. The average consumer, and you probably heard this last night on one of the things we talked about, the average consumer is only going 5.5 miles to their store. So it's critically important that with your brand that you have that. And as you know, I always call it a destination brand. I'm not in the big box stores. I came to you, Mr. Retailer, because this is the consumer you're looking for that we have. And again, I go back to our consumer journey map, consumer tree. And then all of a sudden, wow, he did his homework. Because I'm going to say this to everybody, and I mean this all, please don't go in and say, my stuff tastes great and you make a lot of money. They hear that all day long. I do say a running joke, geez, my stuff tastes terrible, you can't make any money. You might have to buy a what? Because they hear the other ones so much, right? So you've got to go in and show why your brand deserves to be there and who you bring to the basket. And one of the things in Dan's courses that is it was important to me to hear it again, why should you have me? And that's one of the things that Dan talks about in trade spend. So I think that's a big thing that you and I always talk about is trade spend, because Dan's right. Most of the time, the investors ask, well, how much are we spending on this? And you can't give, well, I think, no, here's the exact number. If you have Dan's tool, you've taken his courses, you're pretty much going to be 99% there of exactly what you spent. So that investor, your quote financial partner, feels a lot more comfortable with you than guessing. I'll leave you with this because, again, I talked to the one banker this morning. He goes, Mike, the guy said he had X amount of stores. I said, okay. So I looked at the distribution. And Dan will tell you in the scorecard, you sort of have a good projection of what you want. The guy only has 2,000 stores, but he talked like he had 30,000 stores. And I looked at the distribution report. It's only 2,000 stores. So now this investor, who is a dear friend of mine, said to me, Mike, what do I do? I'll talk to the owner and I'll work it out with him to readjust him. Because this gentleman who invested is a good person and a dear friend of mine, and he wants brands to succeed. He just wants, where are we? Where are we right now? That's all. So that's part of it as well. And
Thank
I
you
think,
for sharing.
let's get into the trade spend because I think that's very important. I think it's imperative today now.
Well, and thank you. And the reason we're setting all this up is, and thank you for sharing that, and thank you for all the compliments. Yeah, I'm trying to really make a difference in the industry. So let me frame it this way. There are tools out there, software solutions, that will quote unquote manage your trade spending. Think about QuickBooks for trade spending. In other words, you put the amount in that you spent and it says that it just keeps track of it. Think of your checkbook, okay? It doesn't tell you how effective the spend was. That's the thing that's missing in all these tools. And some of them have ways to get around that, and they give you a little bit of an insight into what's going on. But because of the way the data comes out, and I don't want to get overly technical right now, I talk about this in the course, et cetera, you need to understand what are the things that impact trade spending. You need to understand what are the things that you need to be looking at. And I'll just give you a quick example. If you wanted to know how well your product is doing in Denver, Colorado, in the natural channel, there is no database on the planet that will answer that question. So if you're promoting here at Sprouts or Natural Grocers, et cetera, there's no way to differentiate how your promotion impacts the category, impacts the retailer, impacts the competitor, if you're looking at any of the databases that are out there. And that's true in other areas as well. So with that said, retail execution, solid business plan, know your customers are, understand your market basket, who buys your product, when they buy your product, what are the things they buy. The more granular that you can get, and this is key, the more effective your trade management's going to be. So as Michael said, over 70% of trade dollars are wasted or ineffective. What that means is they do nothing to drive incremental sales. It's even more impactful and natural. And so when you're talking about what does it cost to put your product on the shelf and get it in the hands of the consumer, this is where that comes into play. So the tool that Michael's talking about that I built is the trade promotion ROI calculator. And it gets down into the nuts and the bolts of how does your trade marketing impact sales? How does it impact the growth for the retailer at the category, et cetera? So I've got a short video. Michael, do you want me to show it?
Yes.
Okay. Are you tired of everyone having their hand out? Face it, retail's pay to play. Wish there was a better way to grow and scale your brand? Well, now there is. It all begins with effective promotion management, and that begins with calculating the ROI from your promotions. If only there were a free tool to do this. Well, you're in luck, because now there is. Before we go any further, we want to set reasonable promotional goals, and we want to set targets that we can reach. Before you know where you're going, you've got to go back and take a look at where you've already been. In other words, if you want to set effective goals, well, what do those goals look like? What kind of target are you trying to reach? Let me show you why this matters. Go to my website and click on the free promotion analysis tool button. On this page, you're going to get a wealth of resources that are going to help you identify exactly not only where you've been, but it'll help guide you to where you want to be. So as you scroll down, the first thing that you find on this page is this tool, the Promotion Efficiency Calculator. I designed this because I wanted you to think about how much money are you really spending on trade spending. Like I said, it's a little bit of a black hole, and a lot of companies struggle to answer this. So, generically speaking, if my annual gross sales are $800,000 a year, and I spend 25% of that in terms of trade spending, then I'm spending about $200,000 a year to get my product in the hands of a shopper. Now, if I can save you 10% on that by with the strategies that we're talking about now, then I can save you $20,000 annually. So the question at the end of the day, what would you do with that money? So let's change some of these numbers and show you how dramatic this can be and why this matters. So let's say, just to make it easy, let's say I am a $1.2 million brand. Okay? At 25%, I'm spending $300,000 a year on my trade spending. Now, let's say that I'm able to go from 5 promotions down to 3 promotions. I realize there's a lot more in that, but just stick with me. So let's say that I have an opportunity to reduce a couple of promotions to eliminate them. And let's say that I'm going to save about $5,000 per promotion. Well, if I can save $15,000, there you go. Then I am reducing my trade spending by 5%. Now, that's one retailer perhaps. What if I did that in 6 retailers or 7 retailers? Imagine how much money you could save. So using that same example, let's say that I'm able to save $30,000. Well, that's 10% like we saw a minute ago. What if I'm able to save 20%? That's $60,000 that you could put back into your brand to help grow and scale. I just eliminated 12 different promotions, or a different way to think about it is I eliminated one ineffective promotion at 12 different retailers. And remember, this is how you make your brand more attractive to potential investors. Now, let's say that after you start getting really efficient at this, you're able to reduce your overall trade spending. Let's take it down to 20%. Okay, but wait a minute. Remember, we said that we saved $60,000 on promotions. So we'll go back to the $60,000. You just reduced your overall trade spending from 25% to 20%, from $300,000 to $240,000. And in the process, you were able to increase your efficiency from 20% to 25% for the $60,000. Now, as a percentage of your total sales, we're still saving a ton of money, $60,000 in this example. But the reality is, if you're saving 20% on your overall trade spending, you're most likely saving a lot more in terms of your efficiency, maybe 30%. And that's because you're more efficient, because you're using your knowledge to be able to choose which promotions are more effective. You're choosing the promotions that are going to do more to elevate your brand. My point is this: play around with this and see how these numbers impact your sales. Use your best guess to define how much you think you're spending in trade spending, and then use this as a benchmark, as a goal. Set reasonable goals. Again, how much did you spend on a particular trade promotion? Back that out. Well, what percentage is that? Okay, now if you back out 2 of them, what if, for example, on a trade promotion you spend $5,000, but now with your new skills, you're able to get more out of that. You're still spending the same amount of money, but now you're able to grow even more sales. Anyhow, play with this. It's free. It's my free gift to you. This is how I give back. Leverage this tool to help you set appropriate goals to maximize each and every dollar of your trade spending. Okay, so now let's scroll down and look at the promotion analysis tool Lite. So here you're going to see a lot of the things that you're going to see in a typical promotion sheet. So do your very best to complete this. Put in the name of the event date, how many weeks long the event's going to last, the fixed cost, anything and everything you possibly can. Now, if you don't have access to the data, to actual sales data, then you can go into a store, for example, and ask a store how many cases of product they sell on an average week, a regular week, without the promotion. And then how many cases do they sell on a week where the product is promoted? Now, I acknowledge that that's not a perfect solution, but it'll give you a good feel. It'll help you understand the dynamics about how all this works. So you've got your base units. Your base units are your sales in the absence of a promotion. Your incremental units are the extra units that you sell during those weeks that you promote. Input all of that. In terms of the dollars, Simply multiply how many units times the average retail price when it's promoted, or how many units times the retail price, the average everyday price. That's how you get to some of this information. This is something I'm going to go much deeper in my Trade Marketing Essentials course. But just to give you an idea of how this works, to start to get you to think about what are the things that impact your promotions, where can you save money, where can you get a bigger bang for your buck. That's what this is all about. Well, after you put in all your calculations and you scroll down a little bit further, you're going to start seeing what those numbers may add up to. In other words, what is the price discount? How many base cases? Again, base cases, cases in the absence of a sale. And I know I didn't show you this before, but if you hover over the question mark, you're going to see exactly what every single item is, what's involved in it, and what's important about it. So, as you're beginning to play with this, pay close attention to how everything can impact your promotion. For example, if you go up here again, and let's say for in-store demo cost, we're going to say they cost $1,000. Or let's say that we're going to pay more to scan the price down. So instead we're going to spend 10 cents. So then go down and take a look at how that impacts your overall performance. This is what you need to be paying attention to. This is your opportunity to become an expert in your trade promotions. Now, the best part about this is the part I'm most excited about. After you do this and you play around with it for a bit and you really get to be comfortable with it, well, then you can actually email this to yourself. Put in your email address and your name and hit the scenario. Now, I'll tell you, it doesn't show up in your mailbox immediately, but it does come. And once you get this, hang on to it. Then you've got your scenario that you're planning. In other words, what are you forecasting in terms of this promotion? You want to be able to help the retailer understand what their expectations are, how many additional cases they need to have, etc. Now, after the promotion's complete, then go back in and put in the actual numbers. At this point, now you've got another scenario. You print that off and you can compare the two. And then you can start identifying what are the unique opportunities to drive more sales. This tool is so very, very powerful. And yet this is something that every brand doesn't have access to. Leverage this. Use this as you're beginning to grow and scale your brand. Use this tool so that you can take it into the retailer and say, look, this is what I'm going to do to help drive sales in your store. This is how much incremental profit or how many incremental dollars I need. And by the way, another thing you can do as you start getting a hold of data is once you start providing more insights, better insights to the retailer, savvy retailers might even reward you by giving you access to your actual sales data. In other words, they'll tell you how many units you sell in an average week. And then they'll tell you how many incremental units you sold during the week of the sale. That makes this a lot more accurate. So anyhow, there are a lot of different ways to use this, but use this. Do me a favor and help me raise the bar in the industry. Share this with any of the brands that you have a relationship with. If you're in a situation where you're able to co-promote with another brand and then you've got your scenario and then they've got their scenario and you put the two together and you take that into the retailer, that's powerful. These are the things that retailers really want. Retailers want insight. So anyhow, thank you for indulging me. So I'm really excited about that tool. And as Michael was saying, this is a game changer. So when we're talking about how to help the retailer, retailers want insights, actionable insights. They don't want a canned report, the same canned report that every other brand shares with them. When you understand your business plan and you understand the important factors that go into your business plan, the consumer, the market basket, what your consumer looks like specifically, all that other stuff, and you get down to that granular level, and then you input that into that tool, now we're able to really help the retailer. And more importantly, we're able to help you grow and scale your brand, get more bandwidth for growth, more for innovation, et cetera. We're helping you avoid some of the wasteful spending that other brands are plagued with. Michael, your thoughts?
Yes. One of the things about this tool, it reminds me of a great line by the greatest philosopher of our time, Yogi Berra. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to wind up somewhere else. And that's the whole thing with your tool. And one of the other things I want to add on to that Dan brought up, when you're in the stores and you meet some district managers, of these chains, maybe a ShopRite or whoever, and you give them your business card, you offer them free samples and all, you'll be very surprised with follow-up calls. And I've done this because, Dan, you and I grew up in DSD. Hey, Dan, yeah, I remember. Mike, I remember you. They're more willing to give you information. What do you need? Well, what zone stores do you have? Well, I only got these 45 or 50. Dan will tell you, if I can get 50 out of 400, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing in the entire chain. Last thing with this tool, one of the things that's going on today, folks, you can read all you want, but the retailers have been doing their own shelf set analysis while this virus has gone on. With this type of tool, you could go into a retailer saying, take a look at what we did promotional wise, and they'll look at their information. By the way, we didn't do well here. Here's some of the areas we missed. Here's our idea for another promotion in another timeline to help you build the customer. If you have an answer to a problem that they know about, but you've already come pretty much prepared with this type of tool, that type of information to get them to where they need to be, they're going to be more than willing to listen to you. One of the things that Dan and I always talk about is you can't go in with the same promotional schedule every year, drop it on the table and say, here you go. What are we doing? Where can we cross merchandise? How do we cross merchandise? And Dan always talks about the other thing with market basket. What's in the basket besides my items? What other departments can we put up secondary displays? Okay. And I always hear this too, Mike, that's a lot of work. Well, if it was easy, everybody would do it, and they don't. That's the biggest thing. So that's the other part where you can work with the category manager of that particular item you have. And I've been able to cross merchandise with other items as well, going into produce, coming out of produce, and going into other areas of the store where it would be another, quote, incremental sale. Look, the one thing I'm going to say, and then we'll get into the rest of the business plan, folks, e-commerce is going to grow. It's going to finish at 21 billion. It was only predicted to do 9 to 11. So now we know it's doubled because of this pandemic. So people are getting used to ease of this. So the retailer is going to look at their real estate, as Dan likes to say, all they're doing is renting you real estate. Well, here's the investment that we can do to help you make sure your real estate gives you back what you deserve. That's the other part of that.
Thank you for sharing that. And on that note, one of the things that I believe is true about category management, the way this is supposed to work, which is not really the way a lot of brands practice it, unfortunately, is that you are, as a category management expert, I was an independent consultant working on behalf of the retailer, even though I was getting paid by Kimberly-Clark, Unilever, et cetera. The point being is that our job is to help them succeed. And by helping them succeed, the retailers, they gave me incremental opportunities that they didn't give to other brands. Oh, and I didn't have to pay for it. Oh, and also they gave me free data. So there are a lot of other advantages to doing this, like Michael said. And this is where, even though it may seem like it is a lot more work at the beginning, these relationships, these add up over time. And when you can do something so impactful in one market with one retailer, well, word gets out. And then other retailers start working with you. It's that know, like, and trust factor. So thank you for sharing that. This is why this matters. This is why we're having all these conversations in the free webinar series. And this is why I brought Michael in today, again, the expert in talking about this. So Michael, with that in mind, you want to, I know we're kind of getting closer in time. If anyone's got a question, throw it up there in the chat box or Q&A. But anyhow, Michael, let's get back to the plan.
Okay. The financials is it's going to be balance sheet. It's going to be P&L, profit and loss statement, and cash flow. Now, here's the other thing about, and we'll talk about this, and it's really behind it in logistics. Cash flow, folks, is managing your inventory to the best possible abilities that you understand working with your broker or a sales team. Now, the Balmoral Food and Beverage Group, we build business plans. Dan knows this, but we make the national account calls. And Dan brings it up all the time, and I'm a proponent of it as well. We walk in to help our financial situation. Here's the stores. Here's the amount of inventory that you're going to need for this promotion. And if you do it reasonably well, the retailer, you've taken quote, the buying time out of them, and they can pass it along to their other people as well. And that to me is a big, big home run. It really is. And over the years, you know what? You've taken one more thing off their plate. So all they do is they send out in their Excel spreadsheet, you need to take this, this, and that. They're done, which is great for you. And then also you can talk about your display activities, where it has to be positioned and all. And again, you got to tell your broker, we're going to be in aisle 14, all the way in the back of the end cap, and that's where our display is. Folks, if you don't get it granular, Dan and I use that word a lot, you're going to miss out. It's the small steps that lead to the big fall. I've said it 1,000 times. And both of us coming out of DSD know, most of the time working with the store managers, working with those district managers and regional managers, they become your biggest ally more than anybody in the corporate office, because they'll say, geez, I saw Dan out there the other day. I saw him working with his broker. He's really trying to keep an eye on his product and my profitability. You know, folks, it's not 100%. But you know what I always say? If I get 9 out of 10 on my team, I'm doing better than I was 0 for 10. So that's how I look at it, and that's how you should do it. So the financials, make sure that you have somebody, hopefully it's us, building your plan to make sure that these things line up accordingly. So again, when you have that plan, and Dan always says this too about business plans, if you're sick for 2 weeks, God forbid, somebody could just look at the business plan and know exactly where you're going. They can take the steering wheel because you gave them the directions to drive the car down the block. Logistics, how do you get to market? Are you going to use distributors? Are you going to use DSD? Are you going to use hybrids, which is something different? How do you get there? These are the things you need to think about. These are touch points, they're cost points. Anything you touch, remember, it has a cost to it. So please remember that at all times. What type of warehousing? Are you going to own it? You're going to rent it? You're going to share it? Okay? Inventory. Please look at it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. And to Dan's point, then you could see after your promotions how your inventory has been depleted, what's the build after it. So now you're pretty good on your cash flow, knowing what's coming in and out, and you know exactly what's been sent out and what your expenditures are. Now, measuring success, here it is. You have to have a scorecard for your broker, working with the retailer. And we do it by distribution of how many stores. If it's 3,000, how many stores are we targeting? 1,500, 50%. And every month, you make sure that your broker is getting it from the retailer. How many stores sold your product? It's gotten so detailed, Dan will tell you, they'll actually tell you the stores that are out of stock. Now you go back to your broker saying, look, store 210 to store 250, those 40 stores are out of stock. What happened? Was it merchandised? Was it taken off the shelf? What happened? Be a detective and ask good questions. The other thing in scorecards, do you have one SKU, multiple SKUs? You put that in your scorecard. Single SKU, folks, we call it just single, multiple, anything over one package is multiple distribution. Dan knows that. And that as well. Know your budget or your budget's going to run you. A lot of times people say, oh, I didn't know about the budget. I didn't see this. Well, then you weren't paying attention to it. That's why when I go back to your financials, from my financials in 6, logistics 7, you have a deployment process of what you're doing, measuring the success. Your budget numbers should be just like that. You know exactly what was sent out. You know exactly the sales to the stores. You know exactly your inventory that's on the floor. And the last thing, what's your short and long-term goals? What have you done well? And by the way, I suggest very strongly, business planning should be done monthly. And I'm also a fan of doing a rolling business plan. I love these guys. Oh, Mike, I got a 5-year plan. Well, good. Give me the 6 numbers for lottery today, and then we can predict those numbers too. Can't do that. I think you have to have a rolling business plan to be successful. As you start to grow, the most I'd like to see is 2 years, maybe 3, but that's a little bit of a stretch. And then you show you long term. So that's basically that. And the last thing I want to say to people is at the Belmullet Food and Beverage Group, we just don't build your business plan. Dan knows this. We have relationships with DSD partners across the country in food and beverage and the national distributors as well. We also work with Safeway Albertsons, HEB, Kroger, Publix, Wakefern, you name it, we know them. And after 42 years, as somebody once said to me, Mike, you seem to know everybody. Well, after 42 years, I hope I bumped into somebody. And that's, and that's part of what we do. And again, I'm a big fan of Daniel Oman's courses. I think it really behooves you to take maybe an hour or two a day to take his courses. And I think you're going to learn a lot of the basic fundamentals of how your business should operate to be profitable and then to be successful. And it just doesn't come overnight. Yeah, I do a lot of reading. I read about 22 to 23 books. I do not sleep on planes. I'm still a wreck after all these years. So I read a lot on the plane, books and all, to see what's going on, to see why the industry's changing and how I got to get out in front of it. You know, somebody said, well, this is happening there. Okay, well, how do I get out in front of it? And this e-commerce that Dan and I have talked about, it is growing. So now you have to have a more detailed plan of your, in my four-legged stool, of exactly how that's going to work.
Thank you for sharing that. And on that note, Michael is just like you said, a voracious reader, but he's on top of things. He knows things. And one of the points I wanted to make out, thank you for sharing all that, Michael, is that this is where hiring an expert to help fill in those gaps makes sense. If a natural brand has people that they've brought into the VP role, the VP sales, we see that a lot. People that don't have a lot of experience, you know, they're going to do a good job in smaller accounts. But when you go in front of a Kroger with 2,900 stores or something like that, you need to play at a much higher level. And don't feel bad about realizing, acknowledging that you could use some help. And this is where someone like Michael comes into play, because he's going to help you knock the ball out of the park. He's got the relationships. He knows what they're looking for. He knows how to talk to them. And he's proven himself time and time and time again. One of the reasons people hire a broker is for that relationship. But remember, brokers are using sometimes cookie cutter strategies because they've got to be all things to every brand that they work with. This is targeted based upon what your needs are. So a couple quick questions. First of all, Deb says, beautiful point on rolling business plan. Michael, I agree completely. Cannot stress that enough. You've got to have a business plan that you review all the time. Doesn't mean that you build it, you set it in the shelf. Deb also says, does Michael have data on the drop in average trips to the grocery store per household? I heard that on that webinar that you asked me to listen to last night. So please go ahead.
Well, the average we're seeing, and it's actually gone down. It was averaging here in the Northeast 2.75. It's actually down one trip. Now, you'd say, oh, it's a competitor. No, it's not. It's e-commerce that picked it up. Some of the zone drops I've seen, and Dan knows I'm fortunate to have somebody in the industry that has this data. It was really picked up in the zip codes of an Amazon. So that's where it's going, Deb. And I think one of the things that you have to realize is that has to be part of your plan. But the other thing too is they're also, now they're getting back into healthy and organic products. That is, health and wellness is now come back strong because people have either put on weight or they don't feel good about themselves. They were depressed about being locked up and all that. So with all that being said and done, a good natural product is still being really sought out by the retailer. And Dan will tell you, if you're going into that retailer for the first time, you better be spot on. This is your Broadway show. This is where they write the review. And that review is the category manager. And one other thing Dan and I will tell you over the years, working DSD and all, the guy that you meet in the store may wind up being that category manager. And he'll remember you all the times you came into the store and you were so helpful. That relationship stays there. So remember who you treat bad today. Maybe the guy who's going to treat you, or the lady, treat you bad tomorrow. So always try to be very friendly to everybody. I've been fortunate because the Kroger buyer, one of them, in the dairy side, was a store manager, and I used to sell him Budweiser years ago, working out there, and we developed a friendship. And now he's the category leader, running the entire dairy. And anytime I have a dairy product, hey, Mike, come on in. He says, just send me samples. And now we were doing Zoom before Zoom was big. He goes, I know how you know my stores. Tell me why. Why do I need this? Why is that consumer here? Those are the things, too, that work out. So,
Thank you for sharing that. And I forgot to say that the scorecard. Thank you for bringing that up too, Michael.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
got a robust module that's in the Trade Marketing Essentials
correct.
course. So keep that in mind if you want to go through it. It's going to help you take what we've talked about and distill it down into actionable steps so you can execute it flawlessly. But back to what Michael said about relationships. At the end of the day, this business is highly built on relationships. And while the category managers that quote, that term I'd actually use, retail buyer, that takes care of the product at the store, they may not have the wealth of experience, but it's how do you help educate them? And this is how you do it, by leveraging these strategies as insights. I know we're over the time. Michael,
Okay.
any parting thoughts?
One thing is that Dan is one of these industry leaders, and I want people to really look at his courses. And I'll say this again. When you look at the cost of certain other learning courses that I've seen over the years, they're quite expensive. But the one thing that Dan brings to it is the reality of it, because he's lived it. And sometimes I think some of the courses that I've seen, they meant well, but they didn't provide what is really happening. Why is this happening? And one other thing, to get back to Dan's courses, if you saw his promotional calendar, there were certain things that he had me think about, and Dan will love the old line, surge zones. And when Dan had that, I could put that in that surge zone there. And people would go, what do you mean by a surge zone? There's certain spots, Dan will tell you in the store, that a retailer knows that there's a heavy amount of traffic, but if you can put your product in there during a promotion to help build the basket and to then, bring it back onto the shelf and all that, they'll say, geez, you really done your homework. You had me think about that, Dan. Surge zones. I haven't thought about that in a couple of years.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Thanks. Yeah, I'm trying to, I would liken it to boot smarts versus street smarts. I'm sorry, ivory tower smarts versus boot smarts, and boots on the ground, street smarts. And the point being is that there are a lot of people out there that'll say this is how it should work, and theoretically it should be correct. However, the funny thing is that consumers do what they want. They buy what they want, when they want, how they want. And that's not predictive to the degree that a lot of people would like to believe it is. So,
Correct.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Give me a couple hours. I will get this up on YouTube. And then, of course, this will be out in the podcast later. Don't forget that next week we're going to talk about the 4 points in terms of getting your product on the shelf, working with a co-packer, et cetera. The week after that is a big one. I'm going to be talking about how do you maximize your how do you make sure you don't lose cash flow, or how do you maximize your trade spending so you don't lose cash flow. And we're going to focus more on deductions. So anyhow, thank you everyone for being here, and look forward to seeing you next week, same time.
Thank you.
Thank you.